Broncos country, welcome back to another video here on the channel. My name is Parker, and in today's video we're going to be going over the Denver Broncos versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers Week 3 preview. Now this video is coming out later on Saturday because typically I pre-record these videos on Friday after the injury reports come out, and then I pre-record them and then schedule the video to be uploaded at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. However, I just wasn't feeling like it last night, so I'm recording now and I'm uploading here. Remember, if you do enjoy this video, to leave a like and subscribe to the channel, as the support is greatly appreciated. And before we get started, I always want to remind you that no matter who you are, Jesus loves you and he wants to have a relationship with you, and that he is the king. And let's go ahead and let's jump straight in to this Denver Broncos versus Tampa Bay Buccaneers Week 3 preview. Now, here are the standings. The Broncos were 0-2, and we're in 4th place. We're in last place in the AFC West. And honestly, you know, I'm not having a lot of high expectations for this game because the Buccaneers are 2-0, and they are tied for first. They are tied for first in the NFC North with the New Orleans Saints. And the Buccaneers are a good team. And so I don't have a lot of high hope for this game, as much as it pains me to say, because I always want to have some sort of hope and some sort of a promise for most every game. But I just, right now, I don't know. I think this is going to be a rebuilding year with obviously Russ's contract being a lot of dead cap. I think we're going to get a top pick. We need to enhance the offensive line, like our left tackle. Will Garrett Bowles be back? We might need to get a new left tackle, maybe even a new center. Need to get some more wide receivers. So this might be a rebuilding year, but we'll have to see how the season plays out, because I know that's not what Sean Payton wants to do. However, these are the current records, and I accidentally skipped over the keys to victory. Here are my 4 keys to victory. Number 1 is we have to get pressure on Baker Mayfield. The Tampa Bay wide receiving core is really good. Pat Surtain is obviously going to be matched up against Mike Evans, and so you feel confident in that matchup. But Riley Moss, he's got another tough challenge this week after going up against Tyler Lockett in Week 1. He's got to go up against Chris Godwin, who has been deadly this season. And then Jaquan McMillan will be going up against either, I think it's going to be Jalen McMillan, most likely. But Tampa Bay's wide receiving core is no joke. The second thing we need to do is we need to establish a run game. So we need to actually get a run game. We're averaging like 1 yard per rush. We have probably the worst rushing attack in the entire league. We need to actually establish a run game and not have Bo Nix be the leading rusher as he was for the first 2 games of the season, because that is not a recipe for success. Number 3 is we cannot limit the playbook. There was reports that Steelers cornerbacks were laughing at the Broncos offense because of how limited it was, and they just knew what was going to happen. Aside from that trick play, they were pretty much stopping us on everything. So we can't limit the playbook for Bo Nix. It's going to be challenging, but Bo Nix has some mental capability to do it. Don't limit it. Open up the entire playbook for Bo Nix. And number 4, don't be afraid to take the deep shot. We've seen a lot of checkdowns, these short passes for Bo Nix. We saw a couple deep passes in the trick play, and then there was a deep target to Marvin Mims, which was a little bit overthrown by Bo Nix, but we can't be afraid to take the deep shot. Sure, we can run obviously a lot of handoffs. We can do screens. We can do short, quick passes, but don't be afraid to take a deep shot here and there to open up the offense and to back the secondary up to open up the run game more as well. Let's go ahead. Let's take a look at the injuries. Of course, running back Audric Estime is still on the IR. I forgot to take him off of the injury report because I put that on last week, but Mike McGlinchey, he also just went on the IR with an MCL injury. Baron Browning will be out this week with a foot injury, which is going to open up more opportunities for both Nick Benito and Jonah Ellis. I'm a big fan of both of them, and so I think they should get some significant playing time with Browning out. John Franklin Myers, he had a concussion last week and left early. It's unspecified whether or not he is going to play, but it looks like he could play, and John Franklin Myers is a big piece to this defense. He provides interior pass rush as well as help stopping the run. So John Franklin Myers will be a key piece to this defense to watch if he's going to play or not, if he passes concussion protocol. Brandon Jones has had a foot injury. It's unspecified whether or not he is going to play. Safety J.L. Skinner has an ankle injury, and he will be out for this week. Defensive end Zach Allen, he has a shoulder injury, and it's unspecified whether or not he's going to play, but Zach Allen is going to be a big loss. He has been arguably our best defensive player. And I know Pat is obviously the best defensive player, and I think he has been. Got called for some ticky-tacky calls last week, in my opinion. But Zach Allen has gotten to the quarterback. He has provided significant pressure in terms of a pass rush and has also been effective in stopping the run. Zach Allen has been a monster this season, and so missing him would be a big-time loss. Greg Dulcich, he's officially back on the IR. He has a knee ankle injury. We'll see if he plays. Josh Reynolds has an Achilles injury. Adam Troutman has a shoulder injury, and Devon Vele has a ribs injury, which, by the way, he had a cracked rib last week, and that's why he didn't play. So if he's already coming back from that, that is one tough dude. But yeah, those are the Broncos injuries. Let's jump over to the Buccaneers injuries, where they have cornerback Jamal Dean. He has a knee injury. He's their CB1, so missing him could be a big deficit for the Buccaneers. But another guy who is questionable, is going to be William Golston with a knee injury. He should be playing. If he is playing, I believe he'll be taken over for, who is it? It's going to be Vita Vea, who's doubtful, which is going to be a big loss. Vita Vea is a game wrecker at the defensive tackle position, not only in stopping the run, but in getting that pass rush up the middle. Vita Vea would be a big-time loss for the Buccaneers. You also got Kalijah Cansey, who is out. I don't think he's played yet this season. And so I do think William Golston would actually take Kalijah Cansey's spot, or Vita Vea's if they're both out. But yeah, William Golston, their defensive line is pretty banged up. One of their offensive tackles, Luke Godecki, he is out with a concussion. Edge Logan Hall has a foot injury. Cornerback Josh Haynes has an ankle injury. Wide receiver Cameron Johnson has an ankle injury, and he is doubtful to play. Rashad White has a groin injury. I believe he is expected to play. And safety Antoine Winfield Jr. is out, and that is another big loss for the Buccaneers secondary. Moving on to the coaching matchup, Sean Payton is in his 17th year as a head coach. He's coached 15 years with the Saints, and this is his second with the Broncos. He has missed 2 seasons. One, which was the 2022 season when he decided to resign from the Saints and was an analyst for a year, and the other one was when he was suspended for Bountygate. During his coaching career, he's coached in 259 games. It's actually been 260 games. I forgot to update that, but I have updated the wins and losses. He has 160 wins, 100 losses, no ties, and a .615 winning percentage. Whereas Todd Bowles is in his 8th year as a head coach, 4 with the Jets, 3 with the Buccaneers. This is his 3rd with the Buccaneers, and he has 1 with the Dolphins. He's coached 276 games with 174 wins, 100 losses, and 2 ties with a .634 winning percentage. Now, Todd Bowles is a defensive-minded guy, so Sean Payton, offensive-minded, Todd Bowles, defensive-minded head coach. 2 different philosophies going at it here. Personally, I do prefer having an offensive-minded head coach. You look back to the glory days with Mike Shanahan. You look back even to Gary Kubiak. He was an offensive head coach. So all of our Super Bowl wins have come with a head coach who's offensive-minded. Not that it means a whole lot. Vic Fangio, Vance Joseph, we've had a ton of defensive-minded guys. But then there's also the Nathaniel Hackett's that we've had. So it doesn't really make a difference. I just personally prefer having an offensive-minded head coach. That's my personal preference. But there's that, and Todd Bowles is a defensive-minded guy. Now for the coordinators, the Broncos OC, we got Joe Lombardi. The DC is Vance Joseph, and the special teams coordinator is Ben Kawika. As for the Buccaneers, their OC is Liam Cohen. Their DC is Cansey Rogers, and I had a hard time finding the Buccaneers DC because I believe, for the most part, it's listed as Todd Bowles. But I think Casey Rogers and one other guy is technically their DC. And then their special teams coordinator is Thomas McGahee, maybe. I'll be honest, I don't know how to pronounce that last name. But, yeah. Let's look at the quarterbacks here. Bo Nix, in 2 games, has 46 completions on 77 attempts for a 59.7 completion percentage with 384 yards, 1 rushing touchdown, no passing touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and has a passer rating of a 51. Now, this is not the Bo Nix that we saw at Oregon that has played through the first 2 games. You can see with the about 60% completion percentage and 4 interceptions. That's more than he threw all in college last season. Now, there was the one technically on a Hail Mary, so technically it doesn't count, but it does. You know what I'm saying? So 4 interceptions. Bo Nix has to have a bounce back game. Now, he does need to have some help. You know, there are some plays where, yeah, Bo Nix is struggled and he needs to improve, like sailing his passes and just not being super accurate with the football. But our receivers haven't been helping. There have been a lot of drops by both the receivers and the tight ends. The running game hasn't been able to stay open. The offensive line hasn't been able to pass block or run block. So Bo Nix hasn't gotten a whole lot of help this season. If Bo Nix wants to turn the season around, he's going to need some help as well. But as for the Buccaneers quarterback, Baker Mayfield, he has been really, really solid. In 2 games, he has 36 completions on 49 attempts, a 73.5 completion percentage, 474 yards, 5 touchdowns. And those are just his passing touchdowns. I believe, if I remember correctly, he does have a rushing touchdown, but he might not. But 5 passing touchdowns, 1 interception, and has a passer rating of 129.1. Okay, sorry, I thought I was about to sneeze, but here are the Broncos running backs versus the Buccaneers front 7, starting with Javonte Williams, who has struggled with 19 rushing attempts, only for 40 yards through 2 games with a 2.1 average, and he has no touchdowns and a 9-yard rush as his longest. I think these stats are updated. I can't remember, though, because he might be averaging about 1 yard per carry. At least he was in the Steelers game. If you just take that game alone, I think he was averaging 1 yard per carry. But then you look back at Jaleel McLaughlin, who's played in 2 games with 13 rushing attempts for 33 yards, 5 receptions for 1 yard, no touchdowns either through the air or on the ground either. The Broncos' running attack has struggled, really, really, really struggled. Probably we have the worst rushing attack in the league, with Bo Nix being our leading rusher for the first 2 weeks of the season. As for the Buccaneers front 7, here is what it's looking like. William Golston and Vita Vea, but they do have the asterisk next to them because they're doubtful to, or Vita Vea is doubtful to play, and William Golston is questionable to play. So they do have those asterisks there, but the other part of their front 7 is Logan Hall, Yaya Diaby, Servakia Dennis, Levante David, and Joe Troyan Shainka. Now, through the first 2 games, the Buccaneers have 44. Just this front 7 here has 44 tackles, 11 pressures, 2 sacks, 4 quarterback hits, and 86 blitzes. Their defense as a whole might have more, but just these front 7 guys, this is the stats. As for their running backs, Rachaad White, I believe, actually, I don't think that should say 2 games played. I believe he might have missed last week's game. Or he might have left last week's game early. I can't remember, but he is clear to go for this week from the reports that I have read. And he has 25 rushing attempts for 49 yards, averaging 2 yards per rush, no touchdowns, and his longest rush was 15 yards. And this isn't great, yet they still have a better rushing attack than the Broncos, which is absolutely crazy that this rushing attack right here is better. It's obviously the first 2 weeks. I do expect it to improve for both teams, but it just shows you how bad the Broncos' rushing attack has been so far. As for Bucky Irving, their rookie, Bo Nix, and Troy Franklin's teammate at Oregon, he's played in 2 games with 16 rushing attempts for 84 yards, and he has 2 receptions for 14 yards, no touchdowns on the ground or through the area, I believe. Then we go to the Broncos front 7. Here's what it's looking like. You got Zach Allen, B.J. Jones, John Franklin Myers, who is questionable. We'll see if he plays. Obviously needs to pass concussion protocol, and don't force him back out there if he's not fully cleared. Would rather have him for the long term rather than just throwing him right back out there and getting him injured and missing a longer amount of time. Then you got Nick Benito, Alex Singleton, Cody Barton, and Jonathan Cooper, and I do think Jonah Ellis will substitute in quite a lot, but this is the starting front 7, and so far this season they each have 57 tackles, 13 pressures, 3 sacks, 9 quarterback hits, and 28 blitzes. And of course we have to remember that Baron Browning will be out this week, so it's not including him either. As for the Broncos receivers versus the Buccaneers corners, this is what the matchup is looking like. Courtland Sutton is going to be going up against Jamel Dean. Josh Reynolds is going up against Zion McCollum, which, by the way, Zion McCollum, he was a cornerback out of Sam Houston State. I believe he was drafted in, I think it was 2022 when we had Damari Mathis, or when we selected Damari Mathis. I was a big fan of Zion McCollum in that draft, and I really wanted us to draft him on day 3 when he was still available. Obviously goes up to the Buccaneers, and he's been honestly balling out. I think he is a very, very underrated player and a very underrated corner in the league. Then you go to the slot. You got Marvin Mims Jr. taking on Tyke Smith as the slot receiver and the slot corner there. Let's take a look at Courtland Sutton so far this season. In 2 games, he has 5 receptions on 16 targets for 64 yards. He's averaging about 12.8 yards per reception. No touchdowns yet, as we have not scored a receiving touchdown this season. As for Jamel Dean, he's had a solid start to the season with 9 completions allowed on 13 targets, a 69.2 completion percentage. He's given up 110 yards and a 95 passer rating. He has no missed tackles and no interceptions and no touchdowns given up with 1 pass defended. Now, the passer rating allowed at 95, that just should show you that we are still early into the season, so players are still getting settled in. This isn't how they're going to perform in the season. This is just what's happening so far. Stats lie and stats deceive, so you can't base everything off of stats. You actually have to watch the film and watch how the players play to get the full story. Next up, we got Josh Reynolds versus Zion McCollum. And so far, Josh Reynolds has been wide receiver 1 for the Broncos. In 2 games, he has 9 receptions on 13 targets for 138 yards, averaging about 15.3 yards per reception, but still no touchdowns in the receiving game. As for Zion McCollum, he's had 5 completions allowed on 10 targets, a 50% completion percentage, has only given up 42 yards with a 21.7 passer rating, has 2 missed tackles, which is a 22.2% clip, and has no touchdowns to 1 interception this season with 4 passes defended. Like I said, Zion McCollum, I feel, is one of the most underrated corners and players in the entire NFL. Then we go to Marvin Mims versus Tyke Smith, and we got to get Marvin Mims more involved on the offense. It's just crazy. He might be our most dynamic playmaker with his speed and explosiveness, but we don't get him involved as much. He's played in 2 games this season, but only has 1 reception on 3 targets for 10 yards. Need to get Marvin Mims more involved if we want to truly open up this offense. As for Tyke Smith this season, he has 8 completions allowed on 13 targets for a 61.5% completion percentage, has given up 93 yards and a passer rating of an 83.2, has 1 missed tackle at a 9.1% missed tackle rate, no touchdowns allowed and no interceptions, and has 0 passes defended. I believe he's either a rookie or in his 2nd year, and he is out of Georgia. Moving on to the tight ends, though, for the Broncos, we got Greg Dulcich and Adam Troutman. So far this season, Dulcich has played in both games with 5 receptions on 11 targets for 28 yards with a 5.6 average, but had 2 key drops in last week's game. So we got to shore up those hands, as Dulcich is our best receiving threat at the tight end position. I'm kind of leaning down here. Let me point the camera down. But then we move to Adam Troutman, who only has 1 target in 2 games so far. So really haven't been getting Troutman involved a whole lot in the receiving game yet. As for the middle linebackers for the Buccaneers, they got Lavonte David, who is one of the best in the entire NFL. Here are his coverage stats. Not great to start the season, but again, it's the start of the season, so you can't take everything that this is who he is. You're going to easily pass on Lavonte David, because I do not think that's true at all, but he is going to be a force in stopping the run game. As for Savakia Dennis, same type of thing. Not necessarily who he is going to be as a player, but, he is. Lavonte David is the better of the 2, but I don't think either of them really. I would say Lavonte David's solid in coverage. Savakia Dennis is to be determined. Well, we will have to see how that matchup goes with our tight ends. As for the safeties, though, for the Buccaneers, Antoine Winfield Jr. will be missing this game, so that is a big, big miss for the Buccaneers secondary. So we got Jordan Whitehead and Christian Izien, with Whitehead giving up 5 completions on 10 targets, 52 yards, a 65% 65.4 passer rating, 1 missed tackle, 1 pass defended, has no interceptions, but has not given up a touchdown either. As for Christian Izien, he's allowed 3 completions on 7 targets for a 42.9% completion percentage, has only given up 34 yards and a passer rating of an 18.5. Has 4 missed tackles, though, and that's 25% of the tackles that he has made. So 16 total tackles, 4 missed is 25%. Obviously, that's how math works. And then he has no touchdowns given up and 1 interception with 3 passes defended. But yeah, those are the safeties. I was trying to think of something else, but yeah, let's move on to the Broncos corners versus it's the Buccaneers receivers. I forgot to update this again. I'm sorry. Let me update this real quick. Alrighty, we're back. This is how the Broncos corner scheduled to match up against the Buccaneers receivers. We got PS2 on Mike Evans. That's going to be a fantastic matchup to watch. Then you got Riley Moss against Chris Godwin. Riley Moss, this is going to be another challenge for him as Chris Godwin is a really, really good wide receiver, and he's been a dynamic playmaker for the Buccaneers. And then we got the Battle of McMillans with Jaquan obviously having that extra eye versus Jalen not having that extra eye. It's going to be the Battle of the McMillans here. Moving on. Okay, let's look at Mike Evans here. 2 games. He has 8 receptions on 12 targets, 103 yards, a 12.9 average, and 2 touchdowns. Mike Evans is doing what he does, is on pace, obviously, for another 1,000-yard receiving season, which I don't think he's never had a season where he has not had 1,000 receiving yards. Moving on to Pat Surtain, who has played really well, and another example of why you don't use stats is 5 completions on 7 targets, a 71.4% completion percentage, has only given up 55 yards, but a 94.3 passer rating allowed, no missed tackles, no touchdowns given up, no interceptions, and has 1 pass defended. Did get called for a couple times last week with the flags, and some of them were ticky-tacky that I don't agree with, but that's just my personal preference. PS2 still one of the best corners in the NFL. In my opinion, he is the best, and you can call me biased or whatever, but that is going to be a key matchup. That's going to be a fun matchup to watch in this game. As for Chris Godwin, he has 15 receptions on 16 targets, 200 yards, 13.3 average, and 2 touchdowns. Chris Godwin has been the dude this season for the Buccaneers, so it is going to be a challenge for Riley Moss, this is his first year starting. He's not a rookie, got drafted last year, played a lot of special teams, but his first year starting at corner, he's going to have a challenge on his hands going up against Chris Godwin. As for Riley Moss this season, he's allowed 9 completions on 13 targets, a 69.2 completion percentage, 94 yards, an 89.9 passer rating, has 2 missed tackles at 11.8%, has given up no touchdowns, has no interceptions yet, and has no passes defended. Has gotten picked on a little bit, but I don't think it's been egregious. I think he's been up and down, and I'm hoping he has a solid lockdown performance on Sunday, but that's kind of me hoping. I don't know if it's going to happen, especially against a receiver like Chris Godwin. Then you got Jalen McMillan versus Jaquan McMillan. He's a rookie out of Washington, has 2 receptions on 5 targets and averages 26.5 per reception and has 1 touchdown this season. As for Jaquan, he's had a pretty solid start to the season as well. 3 completions on 4 targets, 75% completion percentage, but has only given up 12 yards with a 77.1 passer rating allowed, has 1 missed tackle, no touchdowns, no interceptions, and no passes defended. As for the tight ends for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, they have Cade Otton, whose brother is the tight end at Washington right now, which is also his alma mater. But he has 1 reception on 4 targets for 5 yards. And then Payne Durham doesn't have a single reception yet. So the tight ends haven't gotten super involved yet this season for the Buccaneers. However, I expect that to change as our linebackers are not the greatest in coverage. They're going to get a lot of tackles. They're going to support in the run game, but in terms of providing pressure on the quarterback and in terms of pass coverage, they are not the greatest. So it's going to be an interesting matchup versus the tight ends, and I do think that the Buccaneers will get Cade Otton and Payne Durham involved more in the receiving game this week. Alex Singleton, you can see this. I don't necessarily think this is right with his one interception. Obviously, I would assume that would count as a target, even though Geno threw it right at him. But I would assume that would count as an interception. But those are the stats for Alex Singleton. Cody Barton, same thing. Not the greatest in terms of pass coverage here. As for the safeties, PJ Locke has been pretty solid. Despite giving up the touchdown last week to Darnell Washington, he's been really, really solid. Only allowed 2 completions on 3 targets, 66% completion percentage, only 3 yards, a 109.7 passer rating allowed, 14.3% missed tackle rate, 1 touchdown given up. That was to Darnell Washington last week against the Steelers. No interceptions and has 1 pass defended. Despite what the stats say, I think PJ Locke has had a solid start to the season. As for Brandon Jones, he's been up and down. He's been on the injury list a lot, especially in the preseason. Hopefully he can come back and doesn't have to spend a whole lot of time on the injury list, but has given up 2 completions on 2 targets, has given up only 11 yards, a passer rating of an 89.6, a 7.1% missed tackle rate. Pretty solid start to the season for Brandon Jones. As we move on to the Broncos pass rush versus the Buccaneers offensive line, here's the pass rush. It's Baron Browning who has that asterisk because he's going to be out for this week, but he is a part of the pass rush for the Broncos. The main guys who will be rushing the passer are going to be Nick Benito, Jonathan Cooper, Jonah Ellis, Zach Allen, John Franklin Myers, who I forgot to put the asterisk next to because I do think he is going to play, but there is the concern for the concussion. Here's what they've done. They've got 33 tackles, 12 pressures, 4 sacks, 7 quarterback hits, and 26 blitzes that they've dialed up. As for the Buccaneers offensive line, they got Tristan Wirfs, one of the best left tackles in the NFL. Ben Bredesen, who I believe is he's actually one of their starters, but then Graham Barton, the rookie, Cody Mauch, and then Justin Skule, who I believe is filling in for Luke Godecki, who is going to miss this week for the Denver Broncos. As for what the Buccaneers have given up, they've given up 6 sacks, faced 25 blitzes, Baker's been hurried 8 times with 3 quarterback hits, and they have allowed 17 pressures. As for the Buccaneers pass rush versus the Broncos offensive line, it's William Golston, Vita Vea, who both of those need the asterisk next to because they could potentially miss this week. Logan Hall, Yaya Diaby, Mike Green, and Greg Gaines. This season they have 13 tackles, 8 pressures, no sacks for those guys, but they obviously do have sacks with other players, 5 quarterback hits, and 39 blitzes faced. As for the Broncos offensive line, it's going to be Garrett Bowles, Ben Powers, Luke Wattenberg, Quinn Miners, and Alex Palazewski, who is filling in for the injured Mike McGlinchey. So far this season, they've given up the offensive line has given up 4 sacks, faced 18 blitzes, 6 hurries, 11 quarterback hits, and 21 pressures this season. As for Will Lutz and Riley Dixon, Will Lutz is 5 for 5 on his field goals and 1 for 1 on his extra points for 100% accuracy in both fields. As for Riley Dixon, he's obviously played in both games with 14 punts, averaging about 50 yards per punt, which is solid. I do like that. Has 704 punt yards, which I believe is more total yardage than our entire offense, which is just sad. Returners have returned 37 yards against him, and his longest punt was a 65-yard punt in week 1. As for the Buccaneers, they got Chase McLaughlin and Jake Camarda. So far, McLaughlin is 5 for 5 on his field goals and 6 for 6 on his extra points for 100% accuracy this season. As for Camarda, he has 6 punts, averaging 44 yards per punt with 268 punt yards, 32 return yards, and his longest punt was a 51-yard punt. As for the returners, Marvin Mims has 8 punt returns, 67 yards, no touchdowns, and 3 kickoff returns for 69 yards and no touchdowns yet. Hopefully, Marvin Mims can get a return for a touchdown or even a big return, because that seems like the only way we're going to score at the rate that the offense is moving the ball this week. As for the returners for the Buccaneers, it's going to be Bucky Irving and Cameron Johnson. Cameron Johnson might miss the game, so it might be Bucky Irving for both the punt and kick returner, but these are their 2 kick returners this season. And then my final thoughts for this game are, I don't know if I'm expecting a whole lot for the Broncos. I'm just hoping to see an improve in the offense. I'm hoping Bo Nix, can settle down, can get his first passing touchdown in the NFL. I'm also hoping that, he limits the picks, doesn't have another 2-pick game, and just move the ball and look like he's growing and building on his performances. I don't know if we're going to win. I don't really expect us to win, but just any improvement. That's what I want to see. In terms of the defense, I think our defense is our strong suit over the offense, and I'm just hoping that, you don't let Baker pass all over us. Shut down the receivers as much as possible, get pressure to Baker. That's kind of what I'm expecting, but I don't expect the Broncos to win this game. I do think we're going to drop to 0-3 as hard as that is for me to say, because I don't want to do that. I don't want to say that, but it is a rebuilding year. I'm not expecting us to be the greatest. I'm being realistic with my prediction, and that's hard for me because I like to be the optimistic guy. I like to be the guy who's pumping it up and just having everyone excited and ready to go. Realistically, I think this is a rebuilding year, and then potentially next season we can start to hopefully compete more. But maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is the turning point for the Broncos season. Let me know if you think that it is the turning point in the comment section below, or what you expect. Sorry for hitting the mic. Thank you all so much for watching. My name is Parker, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace out.